of Queen Elizabeth II as an excuse to spend 5 nights in the most expensive suite in one of the most expensive hotels in London, England. A hotel room fit for a Disney prince. Each night cost over $6,000 for a total price tag of $30,000. Now, to put that in terms the finance minister can understand, that's the equivalent of 2,142 months of Disney Plus. You could subscribe to Disney for 178 years. But Trudeau looks almost frugal compared to our perennial princesses, the Governors General. Our newest Governor General took a trip to Dubai with a royal entourage. They spent $93,000 on in-flight meals. To put that in perspective, you could subscribe to Disney Plus for 553 years for what she spent on one trip. While every Canadian should be offended by the wasteful spending, it's actually worse than that. In both cases, when the facts came out, the government tried to cover up the truth. The Liberals won't actually acknowledge who stayed in the luxury suite hotel. That is your money. That has nothing to do with national security. The government has no right to keep this a secret. The same thing happened with the Governor General's flight. We had the Governor General's top assistant come to a parliamentary committee to answer questions about how they could rack up $93,000 for an in-flight meal. The first Governor General's office, first the person from the Governor General's office blamed the military. Then they tried to blame the diplomats. One of my colleagues even asked what exactly they ate. The response from the Governor General's assistant, quote, "The meals we were given are the types of meals you get on a commercial flight," end quote. She must have thought the details would never come out. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever had a meal flight which includes pan-fried chicken scallopini on fettuccine with mushroom wine sauce and capers, or beef Wellington with red wine jus, potatoes roasted with rosemary and blazed baby carrot, and a red velvet cake with chantilly creme for dessert. Wasteful spending is bad. Wasteful spending fueled by entitlement and arrogance is even worse. But it's the lying and the covering up which should really upset Canadians, because it means they knew it was wrong to spend all that money, and they did it anyhow. On Monday, Global News reported that Trudeau had been briefed about extensive efforts by the communists who control China to interfere in our elections. CSIS had briefed the cabinet back in January about a coordinated effort to funnel cash to 11 different candidates in the last election. They had determined at least $250,000 had been funneled by an Ontario member of provincial parliament. Now, the Global News report did not name names which identify which candidates or which ridings had been compromised by the communists who control China, but the government does know, and they haven't done anything about it. Prior to the 2019 election, the Liberals had been making a lot of noises about Russian foreign interference. They were so concerned, they set up a special task force. Here's what CTV wrote back in 2019 about the Liberal plan to combat foreign interference. Quote, "One key measure is a new plan to inform Canadians about serious meddling attempts during a campaign in an impartial way. The objective is to have a plan to inform people if needed without being seen to be interfering in the campaign. This will be done through what's being called a critical election incident public protocol that'll be overseen by 5 senior level non-political government officials. The members of this new high-level group will be responsible for deciding when and how they decide to inform Canadians about concerning online behavior or content that comes to their attention. It's composed of the clerk of the Privy Council, Canada's National Security Advisor, the deputy ministers of Justice, Public Safety, and the Global Affairs departments. Should an instance of foreign meddling or another interference attempt arise, it will need to meet the threshold of being serious and disruptive enough, even if on a micro scale, perhaps in a single riding, to have an impact on Canada's ability to hold a free and fair election before this group takes further steps. If it's a serious enough case, the group will inform the Prime Minister, all registered political parties, and the public about the threat and the steps they need to take through a press conference, end quote. So the Liberals set up a special task force to tell Canadians about foreign interference during an election. Then the communists who controlled China interfered in the 2019 election, and the task force said nothing. Then the communists who controlled China interfered again in the 2021 election, and the task force said nothing. The Liberals were big believers in the Trump-Russia narrative. They thought that Putin would target Liberals, and they were ready to sound the alarm during an election. But when it turned out to be communists who controlled China doing the attacking and targeting conservative members of parliament, everybody in the government fell silent. There's still much we do not know about communist interference in Canada. Why were no alarms raised? Why did the public servants stay silent? I think you and I both know why. Our Conservative team has already called for emergency committee hearings. Unfortunately, just like the question of who stayed in a $6,000 a night hotel room, we'll have to wait until we elect a strong, stable, Conservative government under Prime Minister Poilievre to get the answer. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant, wishing you a good night.